All right, we are back with recreating games that I like. This is Strophium, and we are recreating Ball Pit. So in the last video, we made the treadmill that I'm calling it the treadmill, the arena treadmill, which we can see is progressing along. We have a tracker to keep track of the distance, and that's pretty much the whole game right now. And once it gets far enough back, it takes the rear segment and transposes it to the front, which it should do now at about 32 meters. Yeah, perfect. Just make sure that we got no seams. Yeah, everything's beautiful. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we are going to get some player movement. So we're going to add a player movement script. And I also want a game mode script. And this is going to be an abstract class. And essentially what I do for game modes is this is just like a root level object that exists in this scene that configures stuff for the scene. In this case, it's going to be like the player input and things like that. So this will be, I'll just call this main game mode. And this extends game mode. And then here we can have private void awake. And I've got a package that I wrote for input called NizGab, which lets me do cool stuff like this. No, we'll do that. Oh, I also have to. Okay. Then player movement. If it's player. Oh. Seals are going to create a method. Okay. And I think we don't really need a whole lot here. We're going to do our movement with a kinematic rigid body. So here we're going to require a component. Whoop. Type of rigid body. And we're going to have a private rigid body. And then we're going to get the component of the rigid body. And then here we're going to have move input equals CTX. Oh, CTX.read value vector 2. You can't change. So because I'm doing like fake physics, you can't use. Sorry, the music in my ear is pretty loud. Okay. because we're doing because I'm faking a lot of the physics, or going to be faking a lot of the physics. You can't use linear velocity on kinematic rigid bodies. All right. And similar to the last one, how we had that game config thing here, I think what we need is a player config, and that's the thing that is going to contain all of the base values for like base damage, base baby ball count, base move speed, base health, as well as it will store all of the active multipliers to that. So we're going to go ahead and make that now. We're going to make a scriptable object, and this is going to be player config. And the reason I'm doing this as a scriptable object is so for the game systems that hook into it later, they can have essentially static references to it without having to worry about singletons and spaghetti and things like that. They can just reference the scriptable object. Yeah, so I think we'll just not overthink it right now. We'll just put all the stuff that we're working on and not worry about things like health and stuff until we're actually doing that. So we're gonna have a public base move speed get set. I don't know. Stop. Okay, I think that's good. So then in here, what is your issue? Oh. Move input times fix that delta time. Oh, we also want to do var planar move input equals new vector 3. I don't know how much I'm gonna planarize stuff. I usually make like a helper method of it. So yeah, I think just for the sake of doing due diligence, I'm gonna make like a little vector extensions. And if anyone doesn't know what extensions are, you can create extension methods in C#, which is basically like for a class that you didn't define, that's in some like third-party dependency or framework that you're working in, you can create code that effectively, from a usage standpoint, it feels like you're adding to it. But oh wow, AI was actually smart with the IntelliSense, the suggestion there. But this is not what I want. So I want to do 2xz. So essentially what this does is it just simplifies this. So if I have move input, which is a 2D vector, it projects that onto the top down plane. So then I can do things like such as move input dot 2x. Oh, I'm so stupid. Okay. We want to extend vector 2. So then here I can do 2xz. And what that does is under the hood, it takes move input, which is a vector 2, converts it to a vector 3, assuming that the xy components of the 2D vector relate to the xz plane. So then here I want to do planar move input times, we also want this serialized field, private player config, debug assert, player config doesn't equal null. Oh, cracked my neck. Config dot base move speed, reorder that, that's fine. And I think, how do I want to do this? So I know this will work, but at the same time, I'm wondering if I should have physical bumpers on the walls or if those should just be triggers. I think the benefit is, so with the physical walls, I can just rely on the rigid body movement, because I believe even kinematic rigid body movement will disallow penetration of other kinematic rigid bodies. But there's like a stickiness, and I don't want it to stick to the wall. Whereas if it's a trigger, I could just I could zero out the positive. Like if you run into the right hand wall, I could have it zero out or clamp the horizontal movement between its value and 0. Or seal it with 0, you know, give it a ceiling of 0. And then to the left, I could also give it a floor of 0. I'm just thinking about this now. I'm weighing the benefits, the pros and cons, because I think we'll go with them solid, and we'll see what issues we run into. So for this player here now, we want to add a player movement script, and we also need to add this player config. Am I tripping? I'll just build real quick. Prefab asset, what? Okay, chill. I should have create. What is going on? Player config. Player config, menu name should be oh. There's a conflict, that's why. Player, and then for game config, this should be config game. Okay, and that's gonna give me a directory, a subdirectory for the config menu. All right, create config player, cool. And base move speed, we'll set that to 1, why not? And then for the player, we gotta assign that config there. Now watch me not have like generated the input action maps. Okay, it's not working. Oh, new game mode. We move this up to the top. Okay. Should be good now. There we go. And again, the reason that we do this config in scriptable objects is because it's a lot easier to manage. Look, we already have issues with stuff that we didn't set up properly. I like 5 as a base move speed. Okay, so we'll do 5. We got to update the player though. We want to make sure that we are constraining the rigid body. We want to freeze its position. Yeah, freeze its Y position. And I think we can freeze all rotation. Yeah, because we want it in like a fixed orientation. He's not going to be turning or anything. All right, so let's see where we're at with that. All right, we're good. Oh, and we also don't really have a lot of sliding issues, so that's good. I'm actually gonna... It's a little bit slow. Okay, but yeah, we'll start at 8. 8 seems good. All right. Another thing we got to do is we got to go to the project settings and we got to define some physics layers because we want to be very particular with the way things are. Oh, my bad. Okay, so we'll go here, add a layer. So we want to add player. I should just do environment, player, enemy, player projectile, enemy projectile, and a pickup layer. We're also going to need a layer. So I don't want the player to collide with his own balls. But I do want to be able to collide with a trigger that's on the player that functions as like the ball recycler, which is when it goes back to the inventory. So we're going to have multiple layers on the player. So I'm just going to put a ball recycler layer that specifically for the player projectiles to collide with. So now if we go back to the project settings, we want to make sure that these interactions are the way that we want. So ball recycler only collides with player projectiles. The pickup layer, we don't want the enemies. We don't want it to collide with itself. Don't want the projectiles colliding with it. The enemy projectiles, we only want that to collide with the environment and the player. It sounds about right. And the player projectiles, we don't want it to come out with default, that. We want it to collide with the environment. We don't want it to collide with the player. We want it to collide with the enemy. We want it to collide with the player projectile. No, we don't want it to collide with the player projectile. But we want the ball recycler to collide with player. Okay, yeah, that's what we got. Okay. Enemies. They're only going to collide with the environment and the player. Actually, we'll make them collide with enemies too. Because the reason that I want them to collide with enemies is because some of them actually have like forward motion. Most of them generally in ball pit, they are more or less stuck to the treadmill. Like they move at the same speed as the treadmill, but some move a little bit faster. And when they move faster, they push the ones in front of them. So the player, you're only going to collide with the environment. Hold on. Right, because the enemy projectile collides with the player. Environment, it's whatever. Environment can collide with everything. Okay, so I think that's what we want. Just make sure we didn't break anything by doing that. And the enemy, this enemy is actually on the default layer, so we want to make sure that this guy's on the enemy layer. We want to make sure that everything in this prefab is on the environment layer. Yes, change children. So we back out of prefab mode. This should be the case on all of these now. Perfect. Okay. So another thing now is we have the player movement. Actually, we're gonna be diligent about, okay, implemented base player movement. Gonna commit all that BS. I like having a relatively clean change log as much as possible, so that way when I inevitably ruin something, I can just undo the last, 15 minutes of work. Okay, so we have the movement and it's constrained horizontally, but what we're not constrained by is the vertical position. So you see here, ooh, I can just go right off the screen and then I can go all the way down here and I can go right back. Whereas in ball pit, like you're constrained basically by the visible viewport. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create like these artificial barriers. And you'll see what I mean. Oops. Oh, that reminds me. We need another layer. We'll get there though. Tools, Pro Builder, Editor. So what I want is basically just like a wall. Ew, don't do that. Tools, Pro Builder, Editors, Create Shape, Cube, Control Shift K. I need to put this into my brain. That's pretty sick. Okay. Yes, that's literally all I want to do. Actually, you know what? We're just gonna make it. This literally doesn't matter. I'm just being neurotic at this point. But I want to make sure that we know vertex color editor. Let's just make this like hot pink, so we know if we're seeing it, we're doing something wrong. And we're going to do a very exact science of moving it until we don't see it anymore. Ta-da! And we see a little bit of a shadow here, so I don't want to do that. So we're just gonna make sure this mesh renderer does not render shadows. Yippee. And we're gonna duplicate, actually, hold on. We're gonna add a layer here. And this is gonna be, I'll call this like player bounds. So this is gonna be the player bounds layer, and this thing is gonna live on the player bounds layer. And then we're going to duplicate you, move you. Oh God, bless me. And what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this the lower player bounds. Actually, player bounds lower. I'll do player bounds upper. And this might be a little silly, but I'm just gonna make these a child of the camera. So when I'm looking at the camera, you can see specifically the interaction of, not very super clear, but the interrelation of the frustum and these thingies. And actually, now that I'm thinking about that, because I want to do some Cinemachine stuff, and if I do like a camera shake, then I don't want the bounds to be affected by that. So I'm gonna not do that actually, but we're gonna move it up here. So if we edit the project settings again, we go to settings, layer collision matrix, the player bounds is only going to interact with the player. Player. Okay, so now, and it's critical that that should be the case, because the way the enemies are going to work is they're going to move to the bottom of the screen, and they're going to, hold on. What's happening here? Why you do this? Does it have to be convex? Oh, it's because it's kinematic, isn't it? Oh, wait, no. Because the wall works, right? Yeah. I did something wrong, guys. I did something wrong. Okay. Player bounce collides with the player. What about environment? Let's just add these just in case. All right, let's see. That's a little bit confusing. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, we're contained. Excellent. Oh, I slipped around. How the hell did that happen? Whoop. Okay. So we're going to change this a little bit because I don't want that happening. Basically, because there's a seam here, I guess it can slip through. So what we're going to do is we're just going to remedy that. Actually, you don't need to do that. But what I want to do is, come on. Pro Builder. We're gonna extrude this up a level. We're gonna grab this face. We're gonna extrude that into here. And because these layers don't collide, it's not causing any issue. It's just gonna eliminate the potential for that seam. Okay. See how that works. And I guess it's worth noting that everyone has a different style when it comes to iteration. With me, I'm very much a like fuck around and find out kind of developer, where I just like changing stuff and seeing how it behaves. It recontextualizes everything for me, and it keeps me in a frame of mind that I know what I'm influencing and moreover what I'm trying to influence. So a lot of people will prefer making like a lot of changes and then seeing sort of like how the culmination of them works and then reassessing. With me, it's like I prefer doing like quantum changes and assessing, you know, you feel me? Okay, so we're good with that. I'm gonna add this added player bounds bumpers. How are we doing it with time? Do we want to call that for this one? Yeah, it's a good 30-minute video. Okay, so I'm going to keep developing, but I'm going to cut the video here. We're going to move on to shooting balls next. All right, thanks for watching. Take it easy.